If you got your Bibles with you and you want to turn to Genesis chapter 41, that's where we'll be this evening. If you remember, Joseph had experienced a major turnaround in his life. He had gone from what looked like a life ruined by hatred and jealousy from his brothers, where they sold him into slavery. They initially talked about killing him, and then they ended up selling him into slavery. And now he's been promoted to the second in command in Egypt of the most powerful nation, or the most powerful nation at this point. And there's a part in chapter 41 that kind of gives a picture that this story is not about Joseph in particular. It's about God working through Joseph to accomplish his plan. In verse 49 of Genesis 41, it says, "And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured." So the grain was stored up like the sand of the sea. That's the same language that God used when talking to Abraham about the number of his offspring in chapter 27. And it's the same language that he uses with Jacob in chapter 32 and talking about his offspring. So his promises are going to be carried out through Joseph in his elevation to power. There was also a comment made, I think Lewis made this comment, and I think it's worth backing up to look at again. And the attitude of Joseph when he names his kids. Remember, he had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Well, Manasseh and Ephraim in order. The first son, Manasseh, he says, "God has made me forget. Forget about the hardships, forget about the family that caused those hardships." And now Joseph is 20 years removed from being sold into slavery by his brother. He's 20 years he's been separated from his family, but he's not been separated from God at this point. He said God helped him forget all the trouble and the hardships. God made him forget about this painful past that he had. And that's something, it's one of those things when you go through this story, there's so many applications that you see in this. And it's the same with us. God has the power to do this for us, power to wash away the past and the power to ease the pain experienced in life. His second son, Ephraim, he says, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." So not only does God have the power to make Joseph forget about the past, but the power to bless the future. That's what Lewis had brought up, I think it was, the past and the future that he references here. So God's blessed Joseph, even though he's experienced some pretty big difficulties. He's struggled physically, he's struggled emotionally, but he's always stayed true to the Lord, and God's blessed him in this great position. So then the famine hits. The people of Egypt now come to Joseph to seek survival. And that famine, my version talks about how it spread over the whole earth. All inhabited lands were affected by this. Chapter 42, Jacob and his family are now suffering from the famine. And he sends 10 of his sons to Egypt for grain, but he keeps Benjamin at home. Chapter 42, verses 6 through 9, says, "Now Joseph was governor of the land. He was the only one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, and he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. 'Where do you come from?' he said. And they said, 'From the land of Canaan to buy food.' And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And he said to them, 'You are spies, and you have come to see the nakedness of the land.'" So they arrive in Egypt, and they bow before Joseph, and Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize Joseph. It's been 20 years. Isn't this how life works, though? Just when you think you've moved on from your past, a painful past, just when you think you've moved to a good point, your past shows back up. And we're faced with the question of, how would the Lord have me to deal with this problem that's resurfaced? And Joseph, who's forgotten about his past troubles and his family, is faced with it once again. And now he's being reminded of his brothers and everything that they did to him. So when they come in, they bow before him. In verse 9, he remembers the dreams that he had had. God's fulfilled that dream where they're bowing down to him. And it's not going to be the last time. It happens over and over throughout the story. So it's been more than 20 years now. He's close to 40 years old. And I'm sure that he probably looks more like an Egyptian than they would. And in verse 7 again, he recognizes them, but he treats them like strangers. He speaks harshly to them. I don't know if that sounds familiar, but referencing back to when Dennis covered my class for me, when his brothers sold him, it talks about in Genesis chapter 37 and verse 4, Talks about how they did not speak kindly to him. They spoke harshly with him. So now Joseph, he doesn't speak peaceably with them either. He calls them spies. He's harsh with them. And he does this rather than revealing who he is. And they say, we're not spies. We're honest men. And they say, we're 12 brothers. The youngest is home with our father, and one is no more. So they believe that Joseph is dead. They believe he's gone. Well, he calls them spies again. They deny it, but he ends up putting them in prison to test them and says he's going to send one man to bring the youngest son back to prove that they're not spies. But on the third day, like we've talked about the third day before, there it pops up again. On the third day, Joseph changes the terms in verse 18. He says, I'm going to keep one man in prison, and the 9 will go back to get Benjamin to come back and prove your innocence. Well, this starts a discussion among the brothers, and they say that the reason for all this trouble is because they're guilty concerning their brother. They're guilty of what they did to Joseph. They saw Joseph in distress. They saw how he begged for his life, how he pleaded with them, but they didn't listen. Joseph at one point during this has to step away because his emotions start to get the better of him. Steps away to cry. But when he comes back, he still does not reveal his identity. And notice that he keeps Simeon in prison. I don't know exactly why he kept Simeon, but I imagine they probably planned on keeping the oldest, Reuben. But he had just heard in their discussion, because as they had this discussion right in front of him, they don't know that he understands because he'd been using a translator. But as they were having their discussion, he finds out that Reuben actually tried to save him. So I wonder if he had planned on Reuben and then changed the plan when he found out that Reuben was actually trying to save him. So the oldest, or the second oldest, Simeon, gets chosen. So the brothers return home with the grain, but then they notice that they all have their money still in the sacks that they were supposed to use to buy the grain. And they're terrified because they think we're going to be thought of as thieves. What has God done to us, they ask. They get home and they tell Jacob, their father, everything, and that Benjamin has to go back with them. Well, Jacob is not a fan of this. In verse 36 of chapter 42, he says, or Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin? All this has come against me. And then down in 38, but he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you're to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow and Sheol. The brothers in this chapter are still working through things. They're working through the guilt and the sin of what they did to their brother. They believe that they sent him to his death, and they carry that guilt, and they believe that they deserve justice against them for what they did. But they're not the only ones that are working through things in this chapter. I think there's part of us at times that enjoys seeing the people that wronged us. I think we enjoy seeing them squirm sometimes. When they're found out to be guilty and they have to face the consequences, sometimes we find a little bit of pleasure. I shouldn't put you guys in that, me. Sometimes I find a little bit of pleasure when justice is served with them. I don't think that's what we see in Joseph here. I believe Joseph is working through these feelings of the past and how to handle things going forward. He's not enjoying this. We talked about how he had to step away to cry at one point. He's overcome with emotions. And I don't know if his harsh treatment of them is right or not, but God's using the circumstances of their lives to accomplish his purpose now. Moving on, chapter 43, the grain had run out for Jacob and family. I don't know how long that grain lasted, and I wonder if Simeon is sitting in jail the whole time thinking, when are they coming back? But the grain runs out, and Jacob tells his sons to go back, and his sons tell him, we can't go back without Benjamin. There's no point in going back without Benjamin if you won't let him go. The man, Joseph, he won't see us without him there. Well, Jacob's not happy about it, but Judah steps up and he tells his father that he will guarantee Benjamin's safety, and he'll take the blame, he'll take the fall if he fails in this. And this is interesting because it's Judah in chapter 37 who had the idea to sell Joseph as a slave. This, coupled with the events of chapter 38, they don't paint Judah as a very great guy. But we're seeing that something may have changed in him. So Jacob agrees to let Benjamin go. He sends him with twice as much money this time, and to help pay for the grain, the new grain, and to pay for the last time's grain. And he sends him with gifts also for the man in Egypt. Joseph sees Benjamin coming, and he tells the steward, bring him to my house to eat. Prepare a meal for the men to eat with me there. And once they're brought to the house, the brothers are afraid that this is a punishment for stealing the grain. So they explain to the steward what had happened. And verse 23, the steward responds to their plea. He replied, peace to you, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your fathers has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received the money. And then he brought Simeon out to them. Just a side note, it's funny as you go through the interaction with the steward, the things the steward says, and the different things that Joseph asks, the specific questions. There's so many clues, it seems like, that the brothers, if they were listening, or I would think you'd be able to put them together, but also I'm able to sit here and look at this from above and see all the story together. When Joseph arrives, they give their gifts to Joseph. They bow to him once again, and he asks about their father, and they say he's alive and well, and they bow to the ground again. And then Joseph sees Benjamin. This is Benjamin, his full-blooded brother. And this time he actually has to leave the room to cry and take time to compose himself before he comes back in. And at the table, the brothers are amazed that Joseph can seat them in birth order. And that's where we end chapter 43. In chapter 44, he orders the stewards as they're leaving, fill their sacks with as much grain as they can carry and replace each man's money back again. But put Joseph's silver cup, put my silver cup in Benjamin's bag. And then shortly after they leave, he gives instructions to track them down and to say to them in verse 4, they had only gone a short distance from the city, and now Joseph said to his steward, up, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks, and by this he has practiced divination? You have done evil in doing this thing. The brothers deny stealing the cup. They even say, if you find the cup with one of us, that person shall die, and the rest of us will all be your slaves. But the steward changes the terms. He says, no, whoever has the cup, that person will be a slave, but the rest of you are free to go. What's Joseph's plan? I wonder what his end game is here. Is he testing his brothers? They did say they were honest men at this point. And they have shown remorse. They've shown some positive change. Or could his plan have been to bring Benjamin back with him to live in Egypt? I mean, after all, he was Rachel's only other son. And with Joseph out of the picture, for all Joseph knew, Benjamin could have been receiving the same treatment that he received when he was at home. And this also would be a test. If his brothers had not changed, if they were doing that, they would leave him to save their own skin at this point. But when the cup is found in Benjamin's bags, all the men tear their clothes and mourn, and they all go back to Egypt with him rather than going free. They bow before Joseph again. And Judah steps up at this point. We have no defense. God has exposed our guilt. He says, we will all be your slaves. And Joseph responds, no, just the one who took the cup will stay. The rest of you guys are free to go. But Judah's not going to let that happen. I love this part of the story. Verses 18 through 34. Then Judah went up to him and said, O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears. And let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a younger brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left with his mother's children, and his father loves him. And then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father, and his father would die, then you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down if our youngest brother goes with it. If our youngest brother goes with us, then we will go down, for we cannot see this man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant my father said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I've never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs and evil to Sheol. Now therefore, as soon as I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety to the boy my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame for my father before my father all my life. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. So Judah pleads for Benjamin's life at this point. Let him go back with his brothers. Let me stay here in his place as your servant instead. Let me take the punishment of this. Do you see the foreshadowing here? It's amazing that it's Judah that Christ comes through and not Joseph. But Judah intercedes on Benjamin's behalf. Judah is willing to give his life to set Benjamin free from slavery. Judah offers his life so Benjamin won't be punished. Judah is the guarantor to bring the child back to the father. This is a great picture of Jesus and what he did for us. He intercedes for us. He gave his life to set us free from sin. Because of him, we don't have to be punished. And Jesus is the guarantee to bring the children back to the Father. With these events, chapter 45, you see people can change. Joseph sees the change in his brothers. And he's amazed and overcome with emotion at what just happened. Verses 1 through 3 of chapter 45. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by. He cried, make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So the brothers are in shock at this point, understandably. They thought Joseph was dead. And now they realize he's second command of Egypt. He's the one we've been dealing with this whole time. And he just sent everybody out of here. He's crying uncontrollably. I would imagine that this would probably be kind of a scary moment for the brothers. What would you say to your brothers at this point? The brothers who hated you, the brothers who wouldn't speak kindly to you, who rejected you, who wanted to kill you, who sold you into slavery, who ruined the life that you had. How would you respond? How would I respond? Verses 4 through 8. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you have sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in this land these 2 years, and there are 5 yet in which there will neither be plow nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord to all his house, and a ruler over the land of Egypt. So he's not harsh with them. No paybacks for troubles that they brought on him. He speaks kindly to them. In fact, he tells them, stop feeling distressed. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel angry. Because it wasn't them who sent him there. It was God. 3 times he says, God sent me. He shows his brother's kindness. And he tells his brothers to hurry home. Tell their father he's alive. Quickly move down to Egypt. He'll provide for them because there's still 5 years of this famine. And when Pharaoh hears the news in verse 16, he's pleased and he confirms everything that Joseph just said. Pharaoh even says, don't worry about packing your belongings. You can leave that stuff at home. The best of Egypt is yours when you come here. And Joseph gives one more instruction in verse 24 where he tells them, as they go away, he says, don't quarrel along the way. This is not a time for arguments, not a time for fights. This is a time of joy where they've been reunited. So the brothers return home. They tell their father, and Jacob is stunned, of course, and he says he must see his son before he dies. In chapter 46, Jacob prepares for his journey to Egypt, and he stops at Beersheba, which is on the southern end of Canaan. He stops at Beersheba to offer sacrifices. The Lord then comes out to Jacob in a vision and tells him not to be afraid to go to Egypt. He'll make a great nation of him down there. This is a great part of the story. It shows that Jacob was holding on to God's promises. He knew that he was living in the promised land already. We've just in our study through Genesis, there's been repeated times where they're told not to leave the land. He knew he was in the promised land. He wasn't supposed to leave the promised land. And so Jacob's fearful about going to Egypt. But God tells him, don't be afraid, go ahead and go. That God would fulfill all of his promises down there. He even says he will go with Jacob down there. He'll bring him back to the promised land. And with this assurance, Jacob goes ahead and goes to Egypt. Verse 27 tells us that all of Jacob's house now in Egypt were 70 people, not including his sons' wives. In verse 29 and 30, Joseph and Jacob are reunited, and Jacob says now he can die in peace knowing that Joseph's still alive. Chapter 47 starts with Pharaoh giving Jacob's family the best of the land, and then Joseph brings Jacob into Pharaoh. And they have an interesting exchange. Pharaoh asks him, how many are the days of the years of your life? He asks how old he is. And Jacob's response is interesting. Verse 9 of chapter 47, Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers and the days of their sojourning. He's blunt. He says, I'm 130 and life's been hard. We've discussed recently about Jacob. He's faced a lot of difficulties in his life, due mostly to his life choices. He's been relying on his own wit rather than instead of relying on God. And God's taken him down a difficult path just to reach the strength of faith that he has now. And next, Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Actually, he blesses him twice. And I'm not sure if the blessings that he gave to Pharaoh are like the ones that he would give to his sons or not. But Hebrews 7:7, in talking about Melchizedek and Abraham, says that the inferior was blessed by the superior. So even though Jacob is moving into territory that's owned by Pharaoh, Jacob is the superior as the keeper of God's promises. That's the head of God's promises. After that, Joseph settles his family in the land of Goshen. So the famine's been severe. And as it continues, the people run out of money. This one I did kind of run through in class last time. But as the people run out of money, then they start to bring their livestock and trade their livestock for grain. And once the livestock is gone, the people in verse 19 say, buy us, buy our land. So Joseph agrees to it. He tells them in verse 23 and 24, here's the deal. I've bought you and your land for Pharaoh. I'm giving you seed, and you're still going to sow the land. But when you harvest it, 20% goes to Pharaoh. But you keep 80%. You keep 80% for seed for the future harvesting or future sowing and to feed your family. And the people don't complain about this at all. In fact, they're grateful. They're overflowing with praise for Joseph at this point and this gift that he's given them. They recognize that their lives have been saved from death. So they're more than willing to give their lives in service to Pharaoh because of this. Once again, with that, the pictures of Jesus, the foreshadowing you see here, in this deal that Joseph makes with the people and what Jesus does for us. In this world without help, we're dead because of sin. But Jesus says, here's the deal, I've paid for your sin. I've bought you. I'll save you and I'll provide for you, but you'll have to give your life to me 100%. It's like we talked about in class this morning in chapter 30 or verse 30 of chapter 12, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. Are we grateful like the Egyptians were? Their physical lives have been saved from death, and they were elated that this would happen. Are we grateful that our spiritual lives are saved? Do we say, I'll gladly serve my Creator. I'll gladly give my life and my possessions to Him in service because He saved me from death? I think the only people that would complain about that deal are people who don't realize that they're dead otherwise. At the end of chapter 47, Jacob makes Joseph swear to bury him with Abraham and Isaac. And in chapter 48, Jacob's nearing the end of his life. He blesses Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and Jacob makes them equal heirs with his sons, just like Reuben and Simeon. Chapter 49, Jacob calls together all of his sons, giving them the blessings, and he tells them what's going to happen to them in the days to come. And at the end of 49 and into 50, Jacob dies. Joseph has him embalmed, and then he goes to Pharaoh and asks Pharaoh for permission to travel to bury him. So Joseph leaves to bury his father, but it's not just him, it's all the servants of Pharaoh, it's the elders of his household, all the elders of the land of Egypt. It's his brother and his father's households, as well as Joseph and all his households. This is a huge procession, to the point that the people of the inhabitants of the land of Canaan see it and recognize what a big event it is. When they get back to Egypt, it's apparent that the brothers don't think time heals all wounds. Verses 15 through 18, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, this is chapter 50, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, and they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of your servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him, saying, 'Behold, we are your servants.'" They know they did evil, they admit it, but they don't run. They ask forgiveness. They ask forgiveness first through their father's words, but then through their own words also. And Joseph, continuing on in 19 through 21, he says, "But Joseph said to them, 'Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones.' Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them." Verse 19, he says, "Don't be afraid." The end of 21 says he spoke kindly to them and comforted them. How is he able to forgive? How is Joseph able to speak kindly and comfort them, knowing all the evil that they did? First, he says he's not in the place of God. It's not his place to deal out justice. It's not his place to punish them. He says that job is for God alone. Secondly, he says God's been at work. He doesn't deny that they did evil. He knows what their motives were. They did mean to hurt him. They did mean to harm him. He doesn't deny their sin, but Joseph said God was at work. He was using their evil actions to accomplish his purpose. And lastly, Joseph can forgive because of his great faith. Like Jacob, Joseph knew that God would be faithful to his promises and bring his people back to the promised land. So he makes his family take an oath that when they leave Egypt for the land that God promised them, that they would carry his bones and bury him there. In the book of Genesis, it begins with the Lord creating an earth that was good, and he did that from nothing. And now at the end of the book, God creates good from man's evil intentions. And going back, that verse 20 of chapter 50, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." God meant it for good. That word meant or intended has the meaning to weave or to fabricate or craft. Like a skilled worker who can take a raw material or something that's broken and make something beautiful or something useful. This is the story of Joseph. God took the evil that Joseph's brothers did and the hardships in his life, and he crafted it through his goodness to bring about something good. He elevated Joseph to preserve the lives of his people and to fulfill his promises. And this is also the story of Jesus. God took the evil that man did to his son, and he crafted it through his love and through his mercy. And he raised up his son to preserve our lives from eternal punishment.